Han Solo was covered in grease when the alarm went off. He was lying under the belly of a broken cargo shuttle, his hands deep inside a mess of wires and pipes, when the red lights started flashing across the ceiling of the repair bay. He pulled himself out and wiped his face with the back of his hand, leaving a dark streak across his cheek. The alarm was loud. It was the kind of alarm that made everyone stop what they were doing and look up. He stood and looked around. The repair bay was a wide-open space filled with broken ships, scattered tools, and the smell of engine oil. It sat near the edge of Outpost 7, a small station built into the rocky side of a mountain on a planet called Doron. Doron was not a kind planet. It was hot, dry, and covered in volcanic ridges that glowed orange at night. But the Galactic Trade Union needed a refueling station in this part of space, so they built one here, and filled it with workers who had nowhere better to go. Han Solo was one of those workers. He was 26 years old, born on Earth, raised on a colony ship, and trained as a mechanic since he was old enough to hold a wrench. He had no family left, no ship of his own, just a small room on the station, a locker full of tools, and a job that paid just enough to keep him fed. He did not complain. He liked machines. Machines made sense. You found the broken part, you fixed it, and the thing worked again. People were harder. The galaxy was harder. But machines were honest. The alarm kept screaming. Han Solo walked toward the main door of the bay and stepped outside into the hot air. The sky above Doron was always a dull red, like the planet was permanently angry. He could see other workers stepping out from their stations too, looking in the same direction. Toward Ember Ridge. Ember Ridge was the worst part of the planet. It was a long chain of low volcanic mountains, where the ground cracked open and rivers of lava ran like veins beneath the surface. The air there was thick with heat and ash. Nobody went to Ember Ridge unless they had no choice. Ships sometimes crashed there when their engines failed during landing. When that happened, there was usually nothing left to save. But today, something had crashed there. Han Solo could see it. A trail of black smoke rose from behind the ridge, thick and heavy, curling up into the red sky like a dark snake. It was fresh. Whatever had gone down just minutes ago. A voice came over the station speakers. It was the voice of the station commander, a tall insect-like alien named Biko, who spoke in short, clipped sentences. Crash detected on Ember Ridge, Sector 9. No rescue authorized. Repeat, no rescue authorized. All personnel stay at your stations. Han Solo stared at the smoke. No rescue authorized. That meant whoever was in that wreck was on their own. He had heard those words before. On Doron, they said it a lot. The planet was too dangerous. The heat was too high. The risk was too great. So they just let people burn. He turned to go back inside, but something stopped him. A sound. It was faint at first, almost lost in the hum of the station and the distant rumble of the volcanic ridge. But Han Solo heard it. He had good ears. Years of listening to engines had taught him to notice sounds that did not belong. And this sound did not belong. It was a cry, high and thin, like a baby screaming, but not quite human. It came from the direction of the smoke. It came from Ember Ridge. Han Solo stood still. He felt his stomach tighten. He looked around. The other workers were already going back inside. They had heard the commander. No rescue, no risk. Just go back to work and forget about it. But Han Solo could not forget the sound. It was still there, carried on the hot wind, sharp and desperate. Something was alive in that fire. Something was hurting. He walked to the edge of the station platform and looked out toward the ridge. The ground between the station and the crash site was about 2 kilometers of cracked rock and heat vents. Not far. But the temperature out there was already over 50 degrees, and near the crash site, it would be much worse. His station suit could handle heat, but not fire, not lava, not the kind of heat that melted metal. He should go back inside. He knew that. Every part of his brain told him to turn around, sit down, and finish fixing that shuttle. He was a mechanic. He was not a soldier. He was not a rescue worker. He was just a man with a wrench and a bad habit of caring too much. But the cry came again, louder this time. More afraid. Han Solo closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his mother. She had died on a colony ship when he was 12. A fire had broken out in the lower decks. The crew had sealed the doors to stop the fire from spreading. His mother had been on the wrong side of those doors. He remembered standing on the other side, hearing her voice through the metal, hearing her tell him to be brave. The crew said there was nothing they could do. The risk was too great. The fire was too hot. They said the same words every time. He opened his eyes. He went back into the repair bay and grabbed his heavy work jacket. It was made of thick material designed to resist sparks and engine heat. It was not fireproof, but it was better than nothing. He grabbed a pair of thick gloves, pulled them on, and picked up a breathing mask from the emergency shelf. It was old and cracked, but the filter still worked. He strapped it over his face. His friend Yuna was standing by the door when he turned around. She was a communications officer, small and sharp-eyed, with short black hair and a voice that could cut through any noise. She had come down from the comm tower when she heard the alarm. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Something stupid," Han Solo said. "Han Solo, the commander said no rescue." "I heard him." "The heat out there will kill you." "Probably." She stared at him. She had known him for 3 years. She knew that look on his face. It was the look he got when he had already made up his mind, and nothing in the galaxy was going to change it. She had seen it before, when he crawled into a burning engine to save a trapped worker, when he walked into a radiation zone to fix a coolant leak, when he did every stupid, brave, impossible thing that no one else would do. "You are going to die out there," she said quietly. Han Solo pulled the mask down over his face. His voice came out muffled. "Then make sure someone fixes that shuttle. The left thruster coupling is loose." He turned and walked out into the heat. The hot wind hit him like a wall. The ground beneath his boots was worn, and with every step toward the ridge, it got warmer. The smoke ahead grew thicker. The red sky turned darker. And somewhere in that burning darkness, the cry of something small and afraid was waiting for him. Han Solo walked faster. Then he started to run. The ground cracked beneath his boots as he ran. Small lines of orange light glowed through the broken rock, like veins of fire, just below the surface. The air was getting thicker. Every breath through the old mask tasted like dust and metal. Han Solo could feel the heat pressing against his skin through his jacket, like the planet itself was pushing him back, telling him to turn around. He did not turn around. The smoke was everywhere now. It rolled across the ground in heavy waves, black and gray, hiding the path ahead. Han Solo kept moving toward the sound. The cry had not stopped. If anything, it was getting louder, more desperate, more afraid. It pulled at something deep inside his chest, something he could not explain or ignore. He climbed over a low ridge of broken volcanic rock and stopped. Below him, in a shallow valley between two ridges, he saw the crash site. It was a ship, or it had been a ship. Now it was a broken, burning ruin. The main body of the vessel had split open on impact, and the pieces lay scattered across the valley floor like the bones of some giant metal animal. Flames rose from the wreckage in tall orange columns, and the heat coming off it was so strong that Han Solo could feel it on his face even from 30 meters away. The rock around the crash was glowing. Puddles of melted metal pooled on the ground like silver water. Han Sol scanned the wreckage. He was looking for survivors, but he could not see anyone. The ship looked like a transport vessel, medium-sized, built for carrying passengers or cargo. It had alien markings on its hull that he did not recognize. Not trade union, not military, something else. Then he saw movement near the center of the wreckage. Something small, something alive. He slid down the ridge, the loose rock crumbling under his boots, and moved closer. The heat grew worse with every step. His jacket was hot to the touch now. His gloves were stiffening. The mask filter was struggling. He could hear it clicking and wheezing as it tried to clean the air. When he got close enough to see, he stopped breathing. It was a creature. Small, no bigger than a house cat. It had smooth, dark scales that caught the light of the flames and reflected it in deep blues and purples. 2 tiny wings were pressed flat against its back, shaking. Its eyes were large and bold, wide with terror, and they were wet. It was crying, real tears running down its small face, turning to steam the moment they touched the hot ground. Han Sol had never seen anything like it, but he had heard stories. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories. It was a dragon hatchling. The dragons were the oldest living species in the known galaxy. They called themselves the Yongbi. They were enormous, powerful, wise beyond measure, and they lived for thousands of years. They ruled no planets. They fought no wars. They simply existed, moving through the stars like ancient gods, and every species respected them. Some species worshipped them. No one had ever seen a Yongbi hatchling before. They were born in secret, raised in hidden places far from the rest of the galaxy. The fact that one was here, on this burning rock, in the middle of a crashed ship, was impossible. But here it was, trapped. A heavy beam of metal had fallen across the ground in front of the hatchling, and behind it, a wall of fire blocked any escape. The little creature was stuck in a small pocket of space between the beam, the flames, and a slab of broken hull plating. It could not climb over the beam. Its wings were too small to fly. It was just sitting there, shaking, crying, waiting to die. Han Sol looked around. There was no one else, no other survivors, no adult dragons coming to save it. Just him, a human mechanic with a bad mask and a jacket that was already starting to smoke at the edges. He looked back at the hatchling. It looked at him. Those golden eyes found his through the smoke, and for a moment everything else fell away. The heat, the noise, the danger. It was just 2 living things looking at each other. One small and afraid, one stupid and stubborn. The hatchling opened its mouth and let out another cry. It was softer this time. Not just afraid. It was asking for help. Han Sol felt his heart break. He stepped forward. The heat hit him like a punch. He could feel it through his boots now, rising up through his legs. His skin was starting to burn under his clothes. The mask was barely working. Every breath felt like swallowing hot sand. He moved toward the metal beam and grabbed it with both hands. The metal was hot. Even through his gloves he felt it. The pain shot up through his fingers, through his arms, and into his shoulders. He gritted his teeth and pulled. The beam did not move. It was too heavy, bolted to a section of the hull that had driven itself into the rock. He tried again. He planted his feet and pulled with everything he had. His muscles screamed. His gloves were melting into the metal. He could smell his own skin burning, and the pain was so sharp and bright that his vision blurred. The beam moved, just a little, just enough. Han Sol jammed his boot under the gap and pushed. The beam shifted a few more inches. He could see the space now, just wide enough for something small to crawl through. He looked at the hatchling. "Come on," he said. His voice was rough and broken from the heat. "Come on, little one. Come to me." The hatchling did not understand his words, but it understood his voice. It understood the hand he held out, palm up, steady despite the pain. It looked at the gap, then back at him, and then it moved. It scrambled forward on its tiny legs, its wings dragging behind it, and it squeezed through the gap under the beam. Han Solo scooped it up with one hand and pressed it against his chest. It was warm, much warmer than any living thing should be, but it was not burning him. Its scales were smooth against his blistered fingers. He could feel its heartbeat, fast and wild, thumping against his palm. Behind them, the fire surged. A section of the ship collapsed with a roar of metal and flame. Sparks flew everywhere. A piece of burning debris struck Han Solo's shoulder, and he stumbled. The pain was blinding. He could smell burning cloth and burning skin. His jacket was on fire. He pulled the jacket off with one arm, keeping the hatchling pressed to his chest with the other. He wrapped the jacket around the small creature, covering it completely, shielding it from the sparks and heat. Now he had nothing between his skin and the fire, just a thin station shirt and the air that was hot enough to cook meat. He turned and ran. The ground was breaking apart around him. Cracks opened up and streams of lava bubbled through. The smoke was so thick he could not see more than a few steps ahead. He ran by memory and instinct, heading back the way he came, climbing the ridge with one arm, while the other held the bundle against his chest. His lungs were on fire, not a figure of speech. He could feel the heat inside his chest with every breath. The mask had stopped working. He ripped it off and threw it aside. Now he was breathing raw volcanic air, and each breath was a knife in his throat. He reached the top of the ridge and stumbled. His legs were giving out. His vision was going dark at the edges. The hatchling was still in his arms, still wrapped in the burning jacket. He could feel it, pressing against him, trusting him completely. And that trust was the only thing keeping him on his feet. He took another step, then another. The station was somewhere ahead. He could not see it through the smoke. He could not hear anything except the roar of the fire behind him and the blood pounding in his ears. Then his legs gave out completely, and he fell. He hit the ground hard, but he turned as he fell, landing on his back so that the hatchling would not be crushed. He lay there on the hot rock, staring up at the red sky through the smoke, holding the small creature on his chest. His arms tightened around it. The last thing he heard, before everything went dark, was the hatchling's cry. But it was different now. It was not afraid anymore. It was calling, not for help, not in fear. It was calling for him, telling him to stay, telling him not to leave. Han Solo closed his eyes, and the fire took everything else away. Yuna saw him fall. She had followed him. Of course she had. She had watched him walk out into the heat like a fool, and she had stood on the station platform with her fists clenched and her jaw tight, telling herself she would not go after him. She had said it out loud, "I am not going after him." She had said it 3 times, and then she had grabbed a rescue kit from the emergency locker, put on a heat suit that was 2 sizes too big for her, and gone after him. She was not as fast as Han Solo. She was not as strong, but she was smart, and she was stubborn, and she had spent 3 years keeping that idiot alive. She was not about to stop now. She had followed his boot prints across the cracked rock, moving carefully between the heat vents, staying low when the smoke got thick. She had heard the crash of the ship collapsing behind the ridge. She had heard the fire roar. And then she had seen him appear at the top of the ridge, holding something against his chest, stumbling like a man who had already used up everything his body had to give. When he fell, she ran. She reached him in less than a minute. He was lying on his back on the hot ground. His shirt was burned through in places. His skin was red and blistered. His hands were the worst. The gloves had melted away, and his palms and fingers were raw, swollen, covered in burns that went deep. His breathing was shallow and rough, like every breath was a fight. But he was alive. And the thing he was holding was alive too. Yuna knelt beside him and looked at the bundle on his chest. The jacket was half burned, smoking at the edges. She carefully pulled it open and saw the hatchling. It was curled up against Han Solo's chest, its tiny body rising and falling with his breathing. Its golden eyes were half closed. It looked up at her and made a soft sound, like a kitten purring, and then it pressed its face back against Han Solo's burned skin, as if it did not want to be separated from him. Yuna stared at it. She knew what it was. Everyone who worked in deep space knew the stories of the Yongbi. But seeing one in person, this small, this fragile, this real, was something else entirely. It was beautiful. Even covered in ash and smoke, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. But she did not have time to stare. Han Solo was dying. She activated her communication device and called the station. "This is Yuna, comm officer, badge number 471. I need a medical team at my location immediately. One human male, severe burns, possible lung damage. He is unconscious. I am sending my coordinates now." There was a pause. Then the voice of Commander Biko came through, cold and flat. "Officer Yuna, you were ordered to stay at your station. There was no rescue authorized." "I do not care what was authorized," Yuna said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were burning with something that had nothing to do with the smoke. "Send the medical team, or I will drag him back myself and file a formal complaint with the trade union for negligent abandonment of a crew member. Your choice, Commander." There was a long silence. Then Biko spoke again. "Medical team dispatched. Stay at your location." Yuna put the device away and turned back to Han Solo. She opened the rescue kit and pulled out a cooling patch, pressing it against his forehead. Then she sprayed a layer of burn foam across his hands and arms. The foam hissed as it touched his skin, sealing the burns and blocking the air. Han Solo flinched, but did not wake up. The hatchling watched her work. It did not move from Han Solo's chest. It just watched, those big golden eyes following her every movement. At one point, it reached out with one tiny clawed foot and touched Han Solo's chin very gently, as if checking that he was still there. "He is alive," Yuna told the hatchling, not knowing if it could understand her. "He is stupid, but he is alive." The medical team arrived 12 minutes later, 4 workers in full heat suits, carrying a stretcher and emergency equipment. They were led by a tall alien named Doha, the station's chief medical officer. Doha was from a species called the Marin, who looked something like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and silver eyes. He was calm and quiet and very good at his job. Doha knelt beside Han Solo and ran a scanner over his body. His silver eyes moved quickly as he read the results. Second and third degree burns over 40% of his body. Lung tissue damage from heat exposure. Dehydration. Smoke inhalation. His heart rate is weak but steady. He should be dead. "He is too stubborn to die," Yuna said. Doha noticed the hatchling. He stopped moving. His silver eyes went wide, which was something Yuna had never seen from him before. Doha was the kind of person who could perform surgery during an earthquake without blinking. But right now, he looked like someone had hit him with a ship. "Is that what I think it is?" he whispered. "Yes." "A Yongbi hatchling." "Yes." "On Doron." "Yes." Doha stared at the hatchling for a long moment. Then he looked at Han Solo. Then he looked at Yuna. "He went into the fire for it." "He went into the fire for it," Yuna confirmed. Doha was quiet for a few seconds. Then he shook his head slowly, and something close to wonder crossed his usually calm face. "Humans," he said softly, like the word itself was something he was still trying to understand. They lifted Han Solo onto the stretcher carefully. The hatchling refused to leave him. When one of the medical workers tried to gently remove it, the hatchling hissed and dug its claws into Han Solo's shirt. It was not aggressive. It was not threatening. It was simply refusing to be taken away from the person who had saved it. So they left it where it was, curled up on Han Solo's chest, riding the stretcher back to the station like a small, scaly guardian. The walk back was slow, the heat was still terrible, and they had to avoid several new cracks in the ground where lava was pushing through. Yuna walked beside the stretcher the whole way, one hand resting on the edge near Han Solo's head. She did not speak. She just watched his face, watched the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and waited. When they reached the station, a small crowd had gathered. Workers from all species stood near the entrance of the medical bay, watching as the stretcher was carried in. Word had already spread. The human mechanic had gone into the fire. The human mechanic had saved something from the wreck. The human mechanic was probably going to die. But then they saw the hatchling, and the whispers started. Is that a dragon? It cannot be. That is a young bee hatchling. I have seen pictures in the old archives. That is impossible. No one has seen a hatchling in 1,000 years. The human brought it out of the fire? The human ran into the fire and brought it out. The whispers followed them all the way into the medical bay. Doha sealed the doors behind them and set to work. He placed Han Solo in a medical pod, a long transparent tube filled with healing fluid that would slowly repair his damaged tissue. The pod hummed as it activated, and the fluid began to rise around Han Solo's body. The hatchling had to be removed this time. Doha was gentle but firm. He lifted the small creature off Han Solo's chest and set it on a soft thermal blanket nearby. The hatchling cried out once, a short, sharp sound of protest, and then it settled down, keeping its eyes fixed on the pod, where Han Solo floated in the blue fluid. Yuna pulled up a chair and sat between the hatchling and the pod. She was exhausted. Her heat suit was soaked with sweat. Her hands were shaking from the stress. But she was not going to leave. Doha checked the monitors and looked at her. His condition is serious. The next 12 hours will decide everything. If his lungs heal, he has a chance. If they do not, he did not finish the sentence. Yuna nodded. She understood. She looked at the hatchling. It had stopped crying. It was just sitting on the blanket, perfectly still, staring at Han Solo through the glass of the pod. And as Yuna watched, she noticed something strange. A faint glow was coming from the hatchling's scales. A soft, silver light, barely visible, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. The same rhythm as Han Solo's heartbeat. Yuna did not know what it meant, not yet, but she felt something in the air change, something old and heavy and powerful, like the galaxy itself was paying attention. She pulled the blanket tighter around the hatchling and settled in to wait. Han Solo dreamed of fire, but it was not the fire from Ember Ridge. It was something older, something deeper. He was standing in a vast dark space, endless in every direction, and below him the ground was covered in flames. But these flames were not orange or red. They were silver, bright, cold, beautiful silver fire that moved like water around his bare feet without burning him. He looked down at his hands. They were healed. No blisters, no burns, no pain. His skin was clean and smooth, and running across his palms, his fingers, his wrists, and up along his arms were lines of silver light. They moved like living things, curling and weaving across his skin in patterns that looked like letters from a language he had never seen. They glowed softly, pulsing with a warmth that felt like sunlight on a cold day. He heard a voice. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a feeling that became words inside his mind. Deep, ancient, patient. You carried our child through fire. You gave your body to protect what you did not know. You asked for nothing. You expected nothing. This is rare. This is precious. This is worthy. Han Sol looked up. In the darkness above him, two enormous eyes opened, golden, like the hatchlings, but vast. Each eye was the size of a moon. They looked down at him with a warmth and a sadness and a knowing that made his knees weak. We do not give this mark lightly. In 10,000 years, no creature has earned it. Not the Marin, who are wise. Not the Kelori, who are strong. Not the Voss, who are brave. They are all these things, but they are these things with calculation. They measure the cost before they act. They weigh their lives against the gain. The silver lines on Han Sol's skin pulsed brighter. You did not weigh, you did not measure. You heard a child cry and you ran toward it. That is not bravery. Something we thought was lost from the galaxy. We do not have a word for it, but you humans seem to carry it in your bones. The dream began to fade. The silver fire dimmed. The great golden eyes closed slowly, like two suns setting. Wake now, marked one. You carry the fire of the Yongbei. Use it well. Han Sol woke up. The first thing he saw was the ceiling of the medical bay. White, smooth, humming with the soft sound of machines. The second thing he saw was Yuna's face, looking down at him from the side of the pod. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she hadn't moved from that chair in days. How long? Han Sol asked. His voice was rough, dry, barely a whisper. 3 days, Yuna said. Doha said your lungs almost gave out twice. Your heart stopped once. He brought you back. She paused. You are the most annoying person I have ever met. Han Sol tried to smile, but his face hurt. Everything hurt. He could feel the healing fluid still drying on his skin. His body was stiff and heavy, but he was alive. Then he looked at his hands. The burns were gone. The blisters, the raw skin, the damage, all of it was healed. But in their place, something else had appeared. Silver lines. They ran across his palms, wrapped around his fingers, climbed up his wrists, and disappeared under the sleeves of the medical gown. They were faint, but visible, like veins of moonlight just beneath his skin. He stared at them. He remembered the dream, the voice, the eyes. Yuna, he said slowly. What is on my skin? Yuna's expression changed. She had been trying to look annoyed, the way she always did when Han Sol did something stupid and survived. But now something else crossed her face. Something like awe, and something like fear, and something like the look a person gets when they realize the world has just changed in a way that cannot be undone. Dohan noticed it on the second day, she said quietly. It started on your hands. Then it spread. Your arms, your chest, your back. Silver markings. They appeared on their own. Doha scanned them. They are not tattoos. They are not burns. They are not on the surface of your skin. They are inside it, woven into your cells. He said he has never seen anything like it. She reached to a small screen beside the pod and turned it toward him. It showed an image of his own body, taken by the medical scanner. The silver lines were everywhere, across his torso, down his spine, along his ribs. They formed patterns, shapes, symbols that looked ancient and deliberate. Doha sent the scan to the station's cultural database, Yuna continued. He found a match, one match, in the oldest archive in the system. A record from over 10,000 years ago. She met his eyes. It is called the Dragon's Mark, Han Sol. The Yongbei gave it to you. According to the archive, it is a bond, a connection between a dragon and a protector. The last time it was given to anyone was 10,000 years ago, and the species that received it no longer exists. Han Sol lay there in silence, staring at the silver lines on his hands. He did not know what to say. He was a mechanic. He fixed engines and replaced fuel lines and tightened bolts. He was nobody. He was nothing. He was a human from a dead colony ship with grease under his fingernails and a room the size of a closet. And the oldest species in the galaxy had marked him. A small sound came from beside the pod. Hansel turned his head and saw the hatchling. It was sitting on the thermal blanket next to his bed, looking up at him with those golden eyes. It had grown. Not much, but enough to notice. Its scales were darker now, a deep blue-black that shimmered in the light. Its wings were slightly larger, and on its chest, glowing softly, were silver markings that matched the ones on Hansel's skin. The hatchling chirped, a happy sound, a sound of recognition. It climbed up the side of the pod, its tiny claws gripping the edge, and pressed its head against Hansel's hand. The moment they touched, the silver lines on both of them flared bright. Hansel gasped. He felt something rush through him, warm and powerful and vast, like standing in a river of light. For a brief second, he could feel what the hatchling felt: relief, joy, safety, home. The hatchling had chosen him. Doa entered the room and stopped when he saw the glow. His silver eyes widened. He looked at the markings, at the hatchling, at Hansel, and then he did something Yuna had never seen him do: a deep, slow bow, the kind the Marin gave only to those they considered sacred. "The bond is confirmed," Doha said softly. "The Yongbi recognize you, Hansel. This hatchling is bound to you, and you to it. The dragon's mark is not just a symbol. It is a bridge between your species and theirs. You will carry a piece of their fire for the rest of your life." Hansel looked at the hatchling. It looked back at him and made another chirping sound, then crawled onto his chest and settled there, curling its tail around itself like a cat. "I do not understand any of this," Hansel said. "Neither does anyone else," Yuna said. "That is the problem." She was right. Word had already spread beyond the station. Doha's scan had been flagged by the cultural database, and the database was connected to the Galactic Trade Union's central network. Within hours of the markings being identified, reports had been sent to every major government, council, and species authority in the known galaxy. A human had received the dragon's mark. A human, a species that had only been part of the galactic community for 200 years. A species that most other races considered young, reckless, and unimportant. A species that fixed engines and hauled cargo and fought wars they could not win. A species that the rest of the galaxy tolerated, but never respected. That species now had a bond with the most ancient and powerful beings in existence. The galaxy was about to pay attention. Hansel did not care about any of that. He lay in his medical pod with a dragon hatchling sleeping on his chest and silver marks glowing on his skin. And he thought about the same thing he always thought about. Someone had been crying. That was enough. But the galaxy, as Yuna would soon remind him, did not work that way. What he had done in the fire was simple. What came after would be anything but. Outside the station, the first ships were already changing course toward Doron. They came from everywhere. In the 3 days following the confirmation of the dragon's mark, 47 ships entered orbit around Doron. Diplomatic vessels, military escorts, science ships, and news transports. Species that had never had any reason to visit this hot, ugly planet were suddenly fighting for landing clearance. Commander Biko, who normally spent his days managing fuel schedules and filing supply reports, now found himself receiving direct communications from ambassadors, council members, and heads of state. He was not handling it well. "This is a refueling station," he said to Yuna, his insect-like face twitching with stress. "We fix ships, we sell fuel, we do not host galactic summits." "Then maybe you should not have told the mechanic there was no rescue authorized," Yuna said calmly. Biko did not have a response to that. The station had been transformed. The corridors were crowded with alien diplomats and their guards, all trying to find their way to the medical wing where Hansel was still recovering. Doha had sealed the wing and posted guards, refusing to let anyone in. He was polite about it, as the Marin always were, but there was something in his silver eyes that made it clear he was not asking. Han Sol, meanwhile, was sitting on the edge of his bed in a clean station shirt and borrowed pants, holding a cup of water with hands that were still covered in silver lines, and trying very hard to understand what was happening. 17 species have requested a formal audience with you, Yuna said, reading from her tablet, as she paced back and forth in front of him. The Kalori Empire wants to offer you citizenship. The Voss Collective wants to study your markings. The Trade Union wants to classify you as a protected diplomatic asset. 3 different news networks have offered you exclusive interview deals, and someone from a planet I have never heard of sent you a marriage proposal. A what? I deleted it. Han Sol put his face in his hands. The hatchling, which had been sleeping on a heated pad beside his bed, opened one golden eye and looked at him, then went back to sleep. I just wanted to fix the shuttle, Han Sol said quietly. You should have thought about that before you ran into a volcano to save a baby dragon, Yuna said, but her voice was softer now. She stopped pacing and sat down on the chair across from him. Han Sol, I know this is not what you wanted, but this is what happened. The galaxy is watching, and they are watching because a human did something that no other species would do. Other species would have done it, Han Sol said. No, Yuna said firmly, they would not. I was there. I saw them. The Kelor workers stood at the edge of the platform and watched. The Voss calculated the survival odds and decided it was not worth the risk. Even the Marin, who are the kindest species I know, did not move. Doha told me later that he wanted to go, but his training told him the probability of success was less than 4%. So he stayed. She leaned forward. You did not calculate, Han Sol. You did not check the odds. You heard something crying, and you went. That is what the galaxy cannot understand. That is what scares them, and that is what the dragons recognized. Han Sol was quiet for a long time. He looked at the hatchling. It had grown again. Its scales were rich and dark, like the night sky, and the silver markings on its chest had become clearer, forming patterns that matched the ones on Han Sol's arms. It trusted him completely. It slept beside him without fear, ate from his hand, and followed him everywhere on its small, unsteady legs. It meant star. Before Han Sol could respond to Yuna, the station shook. Not like an earthquake, not like an explosion. It was a deep, resonant vibration, like the planet itself had taken a breath. The lights flickered, the walls hummed. Every person on the station stopped what they were doing and looked up. Then the comm system activated on its own. Every speaker, every screen, every device on the station came alive at once. A single sound filled the air, a low, powerful note, like a horn being blown from the bottom of the ocean. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Yuna grabbed her tablet. Her face went pale. Han Sol, there are ships entering the system, big ones. How big? Each one is the size of a moon. Han Sol stood up. Biol woke instantly and scrambled to its feet, pressing against Han Sol's leg. Together, they walked to the observation window of the medical wing and looked out. The sky above Doron had changed. The dull red was gone, replaced by a light that Han Sol had never seen before. Silver. The same silver as the markings on his skin. It poured down from above like liquid starlight, and in that light, shapes were moving. Enormous shapes. Wings that stretched across the horizon. Bodies that curved through the upper atmosphere, like rivers of scale and muscle and ancient power. The Yongbi had come. There were 7 of them. 7 adult dragons, each one larger than anything Han Sol had ever seen. Their scales were black and blue and purple, and silver fire trailed from their wings like comets. They moved with a grace that made the massive military ships in orbit looked like toys, and they were descending toward the station. Every species on the station gathered outside: diplomats, soldiers, workers, mechanics, cooks and cleaners. They stood in silence and watched as the dragons came down. The ground trembled with each wing beat. The air filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the planet's heat. It was the warmth of something sacred, something that had existed before any of them, before their species, before their worlds. The largest dragon landed first. It was enormous, beyond words. Its body stretched across the volcanic plain like a mountain made of living darkness. Its eyes were gold, deep and ancient, and when they opened, they found Han Solo immediately. Han Solo stood on the station platform with Bjol at his feet and Yuna at his side. He was wearing a borrowed shirt and pants that did not fit. His hair was messy. He had grease under his fingernails again, because he had been fixing a coffee machine in the medical wing that morning, out of habit. He looked like exactly what he was: a mechanic, a nobody, a human. The great dragon lowered its head. It was a slow, deliberate movement, and when its head finally came to rest on the ground in front of Han Solo, the meaning was clear to every species watching. It was bowing. The other 6 dragons followed. One by one, they lowered their massive heads to the ground. 7 ancient beings, the oldest and most powerful creatures in the known galaxy, bowing to a human mechanic who had burn scars on his hands and a baby dragon sitting on his foot. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the largest dragon spoke, not with sound, with thought. Every living creature on the station heard the words in their mind, in their own language, clear as water. 10,000 years ago, we lost faith in the young species of this galaxy. They grew clever, but not kind. They grew strong, but not brave in the way that matters. They learned to calculate the worth of a life before deciding whether to save it. So we withdrew. We hid our children. We waited. The dragon's golden eye focused on Han Solo. We did not expect a human. Your species is young. You are small. You are fragile. You break easily, and you do not live long. But you carry something that the others have lost. You feel the pain of a stranger, and you move toward it. You do not ask why. You do not ask what you will gain. You simply go. The silver markings on Han Solo's skin blazed with light. Bjol chirped and pressed harder against his leg. This one heard our child cry. He did not know what it was. He did not know what he would gain or lose. He only knew that something small was afraid, and he went. Through fire, through pain, through death itself, he went. The dragon lifted its head slowly. The dragon's mark has been given. The bond is sealed. From this day forward, the young beasts stand with the humans, not because they are the strongest, not because they are the wisest, not because they are the bravest, because they are moved by the simple compassion that humans carry. That is why the bond holds. That is why they stand together. But because they are the ones who run toward the fire. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Han Solo had ever heard. Then Bjol climbed up Han Solo's leg, up his torso, and settled on his shoulder like it had always belonged there. It spread its tiny wings, which were still too small to fly, and let out a sound. Not a cry, not a chirp, a roar, small and high and thin, but a roar nonetheless. A baby dragon declaring to the galaxy that this human was its person, and the galaxy could deal with that. Han Solo reached up and rested his hand on Bjol's head. The silver marks on his skin glowed steady and warm. Yuna stood beside him, arms crossed, looking out at the 7 ancient dragons and the dozens of alien ships and the hundreds of stunned diplomats and soldiers, and she smiled. "I told you," she said quietly, so only Han Solo could hear. The universe should have known. Humans always run toward the fire. He just stood there, a mechanic from a dead colony ship, with a dragon on his shoulder, and the mark of the oldest species in the galaxy written on his skin, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Above them, the silver light of the Yongbi filled the sky over Duran, and the galaxy watched, and the galaxy remembered, and the galaxy understood. Humans were not the strongest, they were not the wisest, they were not the oldest, but when something cried out in the dark, they were always the first to answer.